some reason, I'm looking through the San Jose Mercury in the just random stuff section for sale. And I see world's first video game computer space. No price, just call. I'm like, wow, I'm pretty interested in this. So I called the guy. I said, so you got a computer space? Yeah. He goes, yeah. First game ever. Okay, great. What color is it? And he goes, well, what color do you want? I'm like, wow, this is getting very interesting, because who has a whole bunch of computer spaces and who would know that they came in all these different colors? He goes, I got a yellow, a solid blue, metal flake blue, and metal flake red. And he goes, a whole bunch of other games too. Okay, great. Want to come up and see them. These were in a Quonset hut on a sunflower seed farm off of Highway 80 in Dixon, California, halfway between, the Bay Area and Sacramento. And these things hadn't been moved in, probably since 1975. And so I got in touch with Nolan and showed him the pictures and scratched his head, and then like a light bulb went off in his head. He goes, these were Ted Dabney's. These were Ted Dabney's units. This was his route. When he left, he took a route that we had, and he goes, this yellow one's the first one. He goes, I know it. That yellow one is the very first one. I kept the first one, which is a beautiful yellow computer space, and I kept Pong number 46, and we got the rest of them running and working as good as we could. We got it all for $5,000. I don't regret the purchase one bit. Not for a minute.
Well, I'd say 30 years to pretty much the present. The arcades have been relegated to the back rooms and the side streets, and generally been an unsavory type of place. What we want to do is bring the amusement game to age. If we can give it a new zip and a pizzazz, it's going to be financially successful, as well as, I think, a very serious part in the leisure time activity of the American people.
The marriage of traditional pinball machines and computer technology has resulted in the birth of a new breed of amusement games. And Nolan Bushnell is the man handing out the cigars. Bushnell has developed two such games, Computer Space and Pong, and believes that they and others like them will move the pinball industry out of America's bus stations and bowling alleys and into the space age. In 1971, Bushnell invented Computer Space, but sold production rights to Nutting Associates of Mountain View, California, for royalties based on the number of games sold. It proved a good deal for both parties. Sales already exceed 1,500 machines. Computer Space, like Pong, sells for around $1,000 and is played on the screen of a standard television set, which has been programmed to display the desired game. In Computer Space, the player controls a rocket ship, which is trying to shoot down enemy flying saucers while avoiding their missiles. If the player scores more hits than the enemy saucers, he gets one free play. By the time Bushnell invented Pong in 1972, he was able to form his own company, Syzygy Corporation in Santa Clara, California, to produce the game. He has already sold over 1,000 machines and expects to sell 10,000 in the United States by the end of the year. Pong, as the name might indicate, is a game of video ping pong. The two players turn dials which control their electronic paddles and volley with an equally electronic ball. The first player to score 15 points wins. While Bushnell did design and program both his games, the technology he uses dates back to the late 1950s. Thanks to research by the Defense Department in the wake of Sputnik, Bushnell is now able to act out his dream of a nation inhabited by thousands of Pong and computer space games.
The government spent millions of dollars on this technology, And as a result, now it's cheap enough that we can put it into a game and sell it for 25 cents for a few minutes and make $1 out of it. It's something that the research and development really was done many years ago, and now it's cheap enough that with PC boards and integrated circuits, we can use that technology to our advantage.
The basic electronic unit of Bushnell's games is the integrated circuit. Each of these small chips is capable of storing large amounts of information. The program for a game is determined by specific combinations of these units to form a PC, or printed circuit board. The printed circuit board then tells the TV screen what to do. A single printed circuit board is all that is required to operate Pong, whereas 15 years ago it would have taken enough tubes and wiring to fill an average house. Bushnell first saw the commercial potential of video games in a game called Space War, which has been played at computer centers around the country for several years.
We used to play Space War a lot at the AI project at Stanford, which is a big computer complex. And one day it just hit, this is a lot of fun. You ought to be able to package it and sell it for a price. And, one thing leads to another, and pretty soon, from doodling on a scratch pad, you're actually working out some basic block diagrams, and from there you think, boy, it's going to work.
You know what the Atari motto is? Innovative leisure, right? Well, it didn't say innovative arcade games. It didn't say innovative video games. It said innovative leisure. It was broad from day one. I mean, Nolan always had a consumer game in his mind because that's what he hired me to do. And I wound up doing the wrong thing and making a hit coin-op game, right? When I was at Ampex, I learned how to make sync generators, synchronizing, the basic fundamental circuit necessary to get a TV signal, because we had to generate an analog signal. So you do that and you get the ball at one speed and you put paddles up, and it's a very, very boring game. And so I added the speed up and I added the angles off of that, just, to make it playable, interesting. And so it started getting a little interesting. That's cute. And Nolan said, well, it's got to have score. We had a pretty good game, and hey, great. So what are you going to do for sound? I go, sound? I'm already over budget. What am I going to do? Nolan said, well, I want the sound of a roar of a crowd of thousands applauding your win. And Ted said, I want boos and hisses. And I'm thinking, how do I do that? Listen, I got video. I got the goddamn game up. Now you wanted me to do this. I'll be right back. So I pissed around for a day and poked around sounds that already existed in the vertical sync generator and gated them out with the 555 timer. I love it. Years later, the sound is so well thought out, so appropriate. It was like, are you kidding me? It was just, just thrown together in spite of what the boss said. And so that was how Pong came to be.
So everybody's heard the Pong story. Probably everybody's heard the Pong story, but I've heard it many times, and from Al Alcorn himself, who designed Pong. So,
the story I've heard is that they installed one of the first Pong machines in a tavern and let people play it as a test.
Put it out into an arcade and see if it makes money. I mean, that's the market research.
My understanding was Ted built a cabinet a tabletop, simple cabinet over the weekend. And a coin mech bolted to the side of the cabinet, tabletop type of big thing was sit on a barrel.
Placing a interactive video machine somewhere and having people play it was still a relatively new concept. Nobody knew if it was going to go.
Oh, what is the name of the bar in Palo Alto?
San Jose?
No, it was Andy Caps.
It was Santa Clara?
Sunnyvale.
So we'll put it in Andy Caps. You know, it's a coin-op game, be it fragile and humble, and so we did.
Well, my memory is that he gets a phone call, the game's busted, which of course is the usual thing you get on a support line. It doesn't work. What is it, and in what way does it not work? Well, it doesn't work.
The bar owner or manager at the time kind of yelled at them and like accused them of their game being shoddy because it had already broken down and it was no longer functioning or working.
And they get a call, you know, later on that night and like, hey, this fucking thing broke, you know. come and pick up this piece of shit game and get it out of here. You know, this fucking thing broke. You know, I'm not gonna waste my time fixing this crap.
But anyway, the machine, we got the word that it stopped working, and I figured it could be anything, and I'd go out there and take a look at it. And so I went to the machine, and the first thing you do is you want to try to play the game, because the machine was on in a tracked mode, so it was working, but you couldn't start a game. So you open up the coin box to basically flip the micro switch to give yourself a free game, because I'm not going to waste a quarter, you know.
And so they went down to see what's wrong with the machine to fix it, and what they found out was that it wasn't broken, it was just that so many people had played it, they'd filled the coin box with quarters, and it was jammed, and it couldn't take any more.
So many people had played it that it couldn't accept any more money.
The game is broken because it's stuffed so full of quarters.
Completely stuffed with quarters.
And it was a small, I remember it was kind of small, if I remember, it was a small space. It just filled up with the quarters and it wouldn't take it.
When I opened up the coin mech, you know, all these quarters just gushed out. So, whoa, that's impressive.
It's the equivalent of like crashing a server when you launch a new website and it's so popular. So they crashed the server on Pong.
And one of the other reasons it was also so popular is because you could play it with one hand while you're still holding a pint in your other hand. And that also was one of those things that, you know, eventually many, many years later led to the rise of the fun barcades that we have, you know, and we can enjoy now.
As Al will always say with a little, you know, twinkle in his eye, he goes, "This is a problem I can fix."
Basically, the way it worked was you take the money, the deal you have, and you split the take with the owner of the bar. And so I did that, and I had this sack of quarters, and the next day I come into work and I said, I got the machine fixed, and here's the problem. Goddamn thing's making too much money. And really?
But it was one of those great moments where something that supposedly was failing was actually such a huge success that no one could recognize. It was truly the ugly duckling version of technology.
Because remember, Nolan thought, he was like, this is just a placeholder until we get to design the really good game, because who's going to play this stupid shit-ass game?
They went on to produce all of these classic, memorable arcade titles for years that allowed the company to survive and be so much more than a one-hit wonder. So that's my understanding of the history of Pong.
It's a great story if it's true.
When a story is good, you know there's some doubt about it. Like, well, that's too good to be really true. It's probably a boring version of it that's actually true.
You know, it sounds realistic to me. You know, I mean, I've kind of seen that happen in my own. And when you do get a really great game, the coins will just overflow, and you know, it's kind of a cool feeling.
Anyway, that's how that all happened. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, Atari really, why were they in the pinball business? You know, here they had this tiger by the tail of video games, you know, just this supernova of creativity and possibilities, and you know, they were nailing it left and right, creating new genres every other week. Why would you mess around with pinball? You could tell our games were just not working, you know, and due to reliability, poor engineering, you know, thermal issues, issues of the games just falling apart, poor hardware design. You know, I could see the writing was on the wall that we were going to go down. I mean, the pinball division was just a massive disaster. I mean, it was, you know, it's kind of the, you know, kind of the hubris of, you know, I guess Silicon Valley, even in that era, you know, was like, oh, these morons in Chicago, they make these crappy old games, you know, like, you know, we're going to redesign everything. We're going to put the display down in the bottom. We're going to, you know, put the boards, you know, underneath the play field so all the crap falls in and shorts out the things. And I mean, it was really horrific design, and they caught on fire. And, the solenoids, they used this thing called rotary solenoids, which burned up and the screws fell out. And, you know, it was kind of a, you know, just a complete disaster as far as like design and also testing. And so there was a lot of games that caught on fire in the early days. So, but they made a lot of money when they were working. You know, I think the programming was awesome because I did it, you know.
You will hear stories of hot tubs in the lobby and drug use in the office, and I'm here to tell you that none of that happened in my department.
We started smoking pot right in our office. Rob and I were like the premier pot. Sorry, Rob. I and some other person who occasionally shared an office with me for 5 years at Atari, however that frickin' worked, we would just fire up right in the office. It's like, who knows why? It's like, this is like, it's illegal. It's like, it wasn't even a sense of privilege. It was just mindlessness.
I worked in a satellite office. I started in 1977, which was still pretty early. It was only 18 months since the 2600 came out. But there was no hot tub in the lobby of the office that I went to. There was no drug use in Atari, though I don't doubt that it was over where Howard and Todd Fry were working.
Drugs were consumed at Atari by all kinds of people at all levels of management, from the bottom to the top and all over engineering. Not everybody did drugs, but some people did, and some people enjoyed them, and some people abused them, and some people went to the hospital on them. And but by and large, drugs were a relatively nominal factor. Drugs, you know, there was a lot of marijuana, and it participated a lot in brainstormings. So we had the way of, you know, trying to incorporate drugs into our productivity model.
I went home and I smoked a joint, a little bit of cocaine and a little bit of psilocybin in it. And I was sitting there, it was about half gone when I realized, oh, you could do that. And it's like, I put it out and I went and I wrote a page of notes. And my design for that kernel was exactly what it ended up shipping. It was like, it was a tremendous amount of effort, actually, to get everything organized.
You know, they did have good deliveries of cannabis in the inter-office mail. You know, that was probably the primary use of those yellow manila envelopes. So I think it was, Fridays or Monday. I think it was Fridays when you get these really thick envelopes coming through the system. And it was weird. It was like there was a guy working there, and his job was he was the weed dealer. That was his sole job at the whole company.
And there was a very straight German VP of hardware down the hallway in the building. I have no idea. He complained to management about the smell of pot smoke in the corridors. So they got him an office in a different building.
I have been asthmatic since I've been 12. I need drugs to breathe. I did not do drugs because drugs to me were something that let you get up in the morning, and breathe. So and nor did I think I wanted to mix those things. The high of me was doing the work, and I was always a happy guy. So I just didn't feel I needed it. So I never did drugs, but there were a lot there.
Don't put too much stock in the fact that every Atari employee was stoned out of their minds while making games.
I mean, there was all kinds of drugs consumed at Atari, but the real drug at Atari was going into a store and seeing your product, seeing your game on a shelf.
When was this? 1980, 81, that time frame. Prior to Ray Kassar's emergence, I was part of the executive staff, and Nolan, Joe, I, Steve Bristow, Gil, Dennis Groth, finance, we were all friends and no politics and all that, and we all worked together and part of the team. It was great. Once Ray took over, nope, it was all a closed office, and he met with all his hires from Procter & Gamble, and so I realized, okay, I'm out of this. I'm either going to have to quit because Nolan had gone, Joe had gone, Lipkin, everybody had gone. I figured, well, I'll go back. This is my baby. I'm going to do it one more time. And we had used holography. We couldn't keep secrets at Atari. We're just no good at it. So we decided the best thing to do was put out disinformation. So one of the best ones was the next coin-op game is going to have holography in it. It was like, what the hell is that? I knew what it was, because having been to college and studied this physics and stuff. But that was just, but anyway, I decided, well, let's do something in holography. Maybe there's something there. I'll take it. Sounds hard, sounds interesting. I know a little bit about it. And we proceeded to explore holography and what could be done, and came up with a holographic toy that basically sold it to Ray, saying, how would you like, because the cartridge video game business seemed to be very good. How would you like to have a system where the cartridge, it's a cartridge-based system, but the cartridges are half the cost of, everything is half the cost of the VCS. And, hey, go ahead. It were very simple. They were nothing more than an LED, a simple LED game, the handheld LED game in those days. The only difference was we had a hologram with 2 images on it. You look through this box, and there were 2 lamps inside, and when you'd crash a spaceship, you'd see a hologram of a spaceship crashing. And, but you could look through this half metallized Mylar and play a Space Invader game or something like that. We did all the work, put everything together, got a chip designed, package designed, and at the end, Ray wouldn't. We even took it to the toy fair or the consumer. And marketing wouldn't show it, wouldn't back it up, and we did it ourselves, engineering. And we think we sold 100,000 of them, but Ray would not release it, just wouldn't do it. And I realized that was it. They're not going to release that. I mean, this is now in a time when if it failed, you wouldn't even notice it. It wouldn't be a pimple on the balance sheet. But they were afraid to do it. Back when the whole company was, we're sure we'd do it. So that was the end of my career at Atari.
On the simplest level, what the VCS, the Atari 2600, what that is, it's a combination of plastic and computer chips that enables you to play a video game, an interactive video game on your home television, which is something that never really happened before.
If you're making an arcade game, it begins as a hardware project. If you need something more in the hardware, just put it in the hardware and you can use it in your game. The Atari 2600, we didn't have that luxury. The game was already in Grandma's house. It was already hooked up to her TV. And all we could do is make a different cartridge, sell that to the person, he plugs it in.
It was the thing that made video games a worldwide phenomenon. And all it is it's a box that enables you to play an interactive game on your TV. But on a cultural level, that's such a huge thing to do, because there were two things that achieved that changed the world, literally changed the world. One is it put computers in homes. At a time where IBM only had about 10,000 PCs sold altogether, Atari had millions of units installed, and every one of those was a computer in the home. The other thing it did was it created an interactive medium with television, which was always a passive medium. Before video games, people were just zombies sitting on the couch watching TV. But video games turned people into zombies jumping up and down on the couch yelling at the TV. And that was a very different experience. And I think that was huge in terms of taking people from a passive state to an active state. And we're still learning the implications of that.
The entire reason that Atari created the Atari 2600 home console was to put their arcade hits into the home. If we can sell home versions of our arcade hit games into the home, we can sell millions of them instead of just take quarters from the thousands of people who go to arcades. And so the hardware was designed to make it possible to play Tank and Pong. That's about all that they did in the hardware.
So the distinction is this. CoinUp gets to use more expensive hardware. They get to use tons and tons of hardware, and they get to refresh their hardware all the time.
I had played an Outlaw-like game in the arcade. I think it was Midway. And you know, I was just told to make a game, so I said, well, here's an idea, two guys shooting at each other. And so I made that game. My goal is to try to make it like the arcade game, so I could look at the arcade game and say, this is what it has to do. So there really wasn't any need for me to have communication with the arcade guys. I'm particularly proud of the Atari 2600 Canyon Bomber because it also has the Atari arcade game Depth Charge in it. So it turns out that in a 2K byte Atari 2600 cartridge, I simulated both Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge, which were probably $3,000 arcade game hardware.
When I was young, when I was little, I remember there was this drugstore, and in their comic book rack, they had these abridged versions of great literature. You'd read it, and it was the whole story of Treasure Island. War and Peace, a comic book. But that whole notion of an abridged version, that is what was going to happen.
When I did Donkey Kong, I had, not surprisingly, absolutely no contact with Nintendo. Coleco was able to get me a machine. So I had a machine that I could play and look at, and I had already played the game. And like David said, with Canyon Bomber, the game is the spec. Frankly, the hardware is so different in its capabilities that I can't think of any value I would have had getting in touch with anybody at Nintendo. It's like talking to the guy who created the Porsche Carrera about making a bicycle. I mean, it's like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot you're gonna tell me. Here's this masterpiece and do it on this toaster, you know? And I was young enough and stupid enough to not be intimidated. And I wasn't, because I was just a kid. And I was like, no big deal.
I'd have to say one of the more influential Atari games that hit me hard was Adventure.
Adventure had been a very popular game. Adventure is related to really a nerdy game. It's related to like text adventures or to Dungeons and Dragons more than any of the other things, any of the other intellectual property or content on the 2600.
So many games were just like kind of shooters and, you know, combat and whatnot, things like that were very simple. But Adventure really broke the mold for what the 2600 was capable of.
But one of the most, like, I feel like magical, impactful moments on me with the Atari games is that we got Adventure, and I saw the cover at the drugstore, because that's where we had to buy video games, at the drugstore behind the photo counter. And we got it home. I was so excited to play it. I just didn't read the instructions. I just ripped it out of the box and like played it and started playing it. And I was like, I'm this dot, and there's like, you know, the duck chasing me, and I got an arrow, and I can't figure out what's happening. He ate me. Oh my God.
The weird thing about Adventure was the dragons were supposed to be dragons, but they just looked like ducks. I don't know what they were thinking there.
The bridge and the bat, and it was so baffling. I really loved that experience of somewhat confused experience, and I feel like that's actually something I love still in games now, when there's that moment of like, what the, where you just get, games can do that. They can just surprise you, and they can make you feel really bewildered, and then as you slowly figure out how they work, that's part of the pleasure of them, I think, is that not knowing what to expect in them. So that moment of being surprised by Adventure has really stuck with me. Another thing I like about Adventure that I try to incorporate is that feeling that the game is really alive. The characters who are in that world live even when you're not looking at them on the screen. Like when the dragon or the bat flies on the screen in Adventure, you feel like it's been on a journey. It's been somewhere. Oh, the bat went over and it stole the shield. It stole the sword, and now it's in the rooms. Like, you don't feel like it was just spawned in that room. It's been in another room doing bat adventures.
And what it provided for me was a sense of mystery and exploration that would later influence the 2D adventure games that I would make that would help launch my career.
So one of the first questions they asked me at Atari was, what do you want to work on? So I just said to him, I said, what's the dirtiest, most basic elemental system that you have? And he goes, oh, well, that's the VCS. And I said, well, that's where I want to start.
I mean, the constraints on the programmers were worse than I ever even imagined were possible.
2600 doesn't draw a screen. It doesn't draw anything. What it does is it has these little logic devices, these counters and shift registers that say, this is the start of the screen, this is the left side of the screen. The electron beam is moving to the right. I'm going to count. I know how fast the electron beam is moving. I'm going to count until the electron beam is somewhere on the screen, and then I'm going to change the color on the screen for a little itsy bit.
There's only one console where you have to think about the electron gun moving across the screen and what machine cycle you're on and when you can show stuff on the screen. That's such a fun and unique and annoying challenge that it really hooks you.
It's the most fun I've ever had making a game. What do you say, Dave?
Fun might not be the word. You know, it is the most challenging thing you could do. When we were doing it at Atari and at Activision, there were fewer than 100 people in the world who could do what we were doing. And that in itself was, you know, very positive, very uplifting. It's really a sense of accomplishment. If you can create something that, you know, 1 million people love on this horribly limited piece of hardware, you've created something. You know, have a sense of accomplishment.
And there are very few things more technical challenging than trying to get a game out of the VCS in the first place, because the VCS was a very technically limited machine. It sounds like a fabulous thing, and when it first came out, it was, because people had never seen anything like it.
I don't know if other people are as rewarded by it, but you're overcoming tremendous challenges. There's nothing that's easy to do on the 2600. And you're winning, right? I love winning.
And the other thing that's fun about playing them still is that they're all 60 frames a second. They have to hit that or the screen won't draw, you know? So they're all even much better than I think consoles that came out a few years afterwards. They all feel really fast when you play them. No Atari game has any sort of lag or anything because they had no option to have lag.
It's like when today, in hindsight, people criticize the first screen of Donkey Kong on the 2600. When I finished that screen, I thought it was a miracle. And you get people on Facebook today saying it's the biggest piece of junk I ever saw. And you just have to understand the perspective of where you were at the time.
The programmers that worked with that machine were magicians.
So I looked over this game. It was Star Castle. I played it a bunch. I thought about it on the VCS. I looked it over and I realized, holy crap, this is going to suck. This is going to absolutely suck. And I could not afford to have my first project suck. I did a little preparation, and then I marched myself into Dennis Cobal's office, and I said, look, instead of doing this, I'd like to do this. This is something that I think uses some of the basic game ideas, but I think this is something that would work on the system. This other one won't work. And I just made this little presentation to him. And to his credit, he said, okay, you know what, go for it. The first thing I put up on the screen was an animated character. Most people use a block because they want to start working out their game mechanics and stuff like that. I put up an animation. That was the first thing I put up on a screen. And people would go by and they go, wow, that looks cool. What does it do? I'd be like, nothing. You know, that's what it does. There it is. I said, I'm still working on it. Don't worry. It's like, and then it got to the point where it was time to actually play it and have some of the stuff. So I had achieved my goal of trying to make something interesting. And it sucked as a game. And I was exactly caught in the place I didn't want to be. So what I did was I started taking feedback, which was extremely painful. to hear people telling me how much my games sucked. The only thing that really made it tolerable was that I wasn't so self-deluded at that point that I didn't realize it sucked also. Until I worked out making some of the changes and getting it through, I was in very bad shape. And I was feeling some very negative feedback from some other people, and I was feeling, you know, I'm usually the person who's hardest on myself. And that was a tough time for me. And I had to get through that before I could hear what people were saying and start to work on it. And I had to release myself from, but I have to have this, but I have to have this. You know, as a therapist, I always catch people when they say I have to. I always love, people say, you know, I have to, but I have to do this. And I always stop and I say, look, you don't have to. Obviously you don't have to because you're not doing it, right? You don't have to, but you could, but there's probably a reason you're not. And the reason I'm able to give that lesson to my clients now is because I had to get over that. I had this have to that was making things not work. And until I could let that go, I couldn't make the game succeed. And when I did, it forced me to think in new ways, to think outside the box, and to go come up with some other left field solution. And when I made those changes, then suddenly yours was really good. One of the product managers came by who was responsible for this product, and he goes, hey, well, we're working on naming your game. And I said, can I make a submission? Can I submit a name? And he goes, sure, why not? I said, okay, I tell you what, come by here tomorrow morning. I said, you guys won't have it settled by tomorrow, will you? He goes, no. I said, come by tomorrow morning, I will have something for you. I will have a submission for you. So now I know what I'm doing for the rest of the evening. I don't know if you ever tried it before. When you just try to make up a new word, everything sounds stupid. At least it does for me. Everything, I can't come up with something that sounds cool. Everything sounds kind of dumb. So being the algorithmic thinker that I can be at times, I thought, well, if I can't just spontaneously come up with some name, I should come up with a way to derive the name. I'll come up with an algorithm. It's a simple title. What's going on? Maybe I need an action thing. You know, because it's an action game, I need an action word. I don't know the name of the character, but I thought, you know, revenge. Revenge is a great action word because everybody wants revenge, right? So I figure I'll go with revenge, and now all I need is whose revenge is it? Now I just need the name of the character. And then I thought, well, one of the great ciphers is, you know, writing something backwards. That's never a bad idea. You know, the head of the company's name is Ray Kazar. And Ray spelled backwards, that's Yar. And Yar sounds pretty cool. It's got a Y in it, so it's got like sci-fi, anything with Y's and Z's, you know, and maybe an X somewhere. That's good sci-fi stuff. And I sat down and I wrote a 10-page story called The Yarian Revenge of Razak IV. And that was going to be the title of the game, The Yarian Revenge of Razak IV. I stayed all night in the office. I was done like 3:30. I just laid down on the floor in my office and got a little sleep. And then around 10, you know, in comes the marketing manager. And so I handed him the package. I go, here you go. This is the package for the story. I didn't realize it fully at the time, but what I had done was I had created the first backstory in the history of video games.
A fly. I'll have a mutant fly. Hello, Yar. You'll need some protection. Ion zone. Shift chroma. Intensify. Okay, now you'll need some weapons. You have a formidable enemy. The Kotile. Watch it, Yar. He has a lethal drone. And some other tricks up his sleeve. Spiral. Go. Good move, Yar. Now I have a surprise for you. A Zorlon cannon. Use it, Yar. Fire again. Got him. That's revenge. Yar's revenge. A video game. Yeah, this can be fun. This can be a lot of fun. Like asteroids. Get him. Do it. Beautiful. Watch it. Disintegrate. Now let's go into deeper space. Galactic map. Sector 11. Hyperspace. Sights in. Cylon warships, attack. Steady, stand by, photons. Star Raiders. That's it, Star Raiders. That'll keep them on their toes. Let's see what we can come up with next.
We're Atari. We have the vision, and we invented the technology to bring the excitement home to you.